morning. My name is Barbara Yates, and I'm President and CEO of Think Small. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Is that all right? Okay. I'm still Barbara Yates, and I'm still President. It's my pleasure to welcome you this morning to our fourth Small Talks discussion focusing on the economics of early childhood. We launched our Small Talk speaker series with the idea of initiating conversations on topics important to the early childhood field and to discuss innovative solutions to early learning issues in Minnesota. Now this morning we're going to examine how communities across the state are addressing the childcare crisis, what's working, and how Minnesota communities are working together to support and rebuild the business of childcare. Now first, before we go any further, I want to thank and recognize our sponsors for this event. These folks allow us to offer this to you at no cost. So if you'll join me in recognizing the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development, the Egan Company, and Ywca. If we have any representatives, would you please stand and be recognized? Now, joining us today to moderate and lead the discussion is Think Small board member Tracy Nordstrom, along with a panel of distinguished Minnesota community leaders who will bring their expertise to the table. First of all, I'm going to introduce you to Tracy. Tracy is the founder and principal at Verve, a placemaking consultancy. Tracy holds a master's degree in public affairs from the Humphrey School of Public Affairs with a focus on leadership policy and advancing the common good. She considers herself a placemaker, a pedestrian, a community member, a cyclist, a researcher, a writer, a strategist, and a change agent. She is also a Think Small board member where she brings all these talents to us, and she chairs our governance committee. Will you join me in welcoming Tracy?
Support. Thank you. How's that? I'll hold it out here. Good morning. Thank you for that technical difficulty. We know who runs the world, okay? We know who really runs the world. Well, welcome, friends and fellow champions of Minnesota children. Thank you for being here today. As Barb said, I am Tracy Nordstrom, and I am thrilled to be with you today. And on behalf of the Board of Directors of Think Small, I welcome you all. I'm very excited about this conversation today because we are focusing on what's working. And if any of you are like me, on any given day, looking at the world, you can get really twisted in what doesn't work, in where your frustration lies, in the gaps, and all of the things that just make us feel frustrated and dispirited. So today, we're going to focus on what is working around the state. And I think that's really important for a couple of reasons. One, we need to celebrate what's working in other communities to help us, to model for us what works so that we can replicate it and do it in our own communities. And secondly, I think it's really important to come together and celebrate together what's working so we can do more of it. So with that, just to let you know format, I'm going to let our panelists introduce themselves first of all, and tell you a little bit about themselves and why this topic is important to them. And then I'm going to ask some questions, and then we're going to open it up for comments and questions in the audience. So I know that our panelists are going to say thought-provoking things, so make a mental note if you have a question about something, and we'll open it up at the end. Okay? Very good. So why don't we start right here on my right. Let's start with you, Todd. If you would just introduce yourself, tell us about your position, where you're from, and why you're here today and what you're going to share with us a little bit. Okay?
Good morning, everyone. How are you doing? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, so my name is Todd Krafke, and I'm the city administrator in St. Peter, Minnesota. How many of you are fans of St. Peter like me? Maybe you're a Gusty, or you stop at Food Co-op. Keep your hands up, don't be shy. Excellent, thank you very much. Please stop by, spend money, we love that. So my role as city administrator, oftentimes, city administrators are supposed to be pretty dry and keep the wheels rolling and all that kind of stuff, which is great. But part of my job with the city and the community overall is to be a thinker, a thought provoker, a question asker. I help city councils help develop priorities within their community. And so my role as it relates to this topic is finding information and helping be a promoter, helping the city council be a promoter. Within St. Peter, we understand very clearly that even though we're about 12,000 now, many of the people that live within our community choose St. Peter for lots of reasons. And one of those reasons today for young families is where can they get childcare? Quality childcare, affordable childcare, because they might drive to the South Metro to work, or they might drive to Mankato, which is about 12 miles away to work. And so how important is that, and helping them from an economic development standpoint, help keep employees within our community, from a business standpoint, develop new businesses, which may be childcare businesses, and what's the city role in that? And so part of my discussion will be talking about what cities can do, what impact can they have, what role do they have. Let me mention one thing before I quit, which is that it is fantastic for cities and communities to have all this data about whether they're meeting the threshold or whether they're below the benchmark on how many child care slots there are not. But I gotta tell you, I've been a city administrator now for almost 30 years, 21 of which have been in St. Peter, and I find very often, please don't confuse me with the facts or data. It really needs, for cities to be involved, there needs to be some kind of visceral, emotional response to this, and for them to make it a priority. And so maybe I'll share a trick or two about how we did that with the Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation, how they helped us do that and develop a little bit of that. And maybe you can take that back to your own community and help yourselves along the journey a little bit.
Good morning. I'm Lynn Haglund, Vice President and Kids Plus Director with the Northland Foundation in Duluth. And since 2003, we've had a major focus on early childhood, building local coalitions throughout our region, and even one focused on early childhood mental health. But by 2008, we realized that childcare providers were often the undervalued and not recognized people that were contributing to community, and this we heard from them. So we started out by providing an annual childcare appreciation and training, and we were completely amazed when we had over 350 childcare providers attend that very first year. We have continued to do this and become more and more immersed in the focused area of childcare. And in the past 5 years, we have been helping childcare providers to come on board with Parent Aware. We've offered over 100 free trainings throughout our region to make them more accessible and available, because of course, if you think of northeastern Minnesota, we cover the 7-county region, and it is very, it's a big region, over 18,000 square miles. So you can imagine if people want to attend training, oftentimes it's located in the larger areas or larger cities. And so we've tried to make it more accessible to them wherever they are. The other piece to this is that we also, in the last couple of years, have been the area administrators for the Early Learning Scholarships. And so we really have kind of the whole jigsaw puzzle of the early childhood childcare kind of focus. And because of this, we've really built strong relationships with childcare providers. We've really come to know the issues and their concerns. We've also sadly watched 100 programs close since 2011, and we're at about a 4,500 slot shortage in our region. So what I'm going to be talking about is what the Northland Foundation is doing, and how we're partnering with others to really try to address this issue and build the availability of childcare wherever people are living in our region.
Good morning. My name is Cisa Keller. I'm the Senior Vice President of Early Childhood Quality Development at Think Small. Many of you know the work of Think Small, but I'll talk about it a little bit more. As we come to this work, we really come to it through the lens of our strategic plan. Many of you are aware that we've launched our most recent strategic plan using a framework called results-based accountability. And with that, our population level result that we share with many of our partners, including the Generation Next, Northside Achievement Zone, Department of Human Services, as well as many others, is that all children enter kindergarten ready. So our contribution to that population level result is really focused on ensuring that we have enough providers, right? Enough high quality providers, and that those children have access to those high quality providers. So that's kind of how we come at this, both from the provider side and the child and family side. And so we are fortunate in that we are able to kind of have a foot both on the ground, what's happening in a family child care provider's home, a toddler classroom, and then what's happening at a more strategic state level, federal level, and being able to bridge that back and forth. So as conversations are being had at the Capitol, we can bring that right back to the classroom and vice versa. And so we really feel like we can look at this from kind of a systems change, like what do we need to do as an entire state or as an entire region? And again, through this idea that what works in St. Peter and what works in Duluth and what works in Minneapolis is going to be different. And so whatever our system change is, it has to be flexible and really meet the individual needs. And so we just know that we have something to bring to that conversation. And so I'll turn it to Stephanie.
Thanks and welcome. My name is Stephanie Thomas, and I'm the Vice President of Early Childhood Education and Girls and Youth Programming for the Ywca Minneapolis. We have 5 childcare centers across St. Paul and Minneapolis, and I've been in early childhood in leadership and nonprofit for about 25 years and working with that industry. Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how childcare is impacted by things that are going on in the community within the Minneapolis-St. Paul areas, and then some of the unique things that we're doing within workforce development and teacher training programs. So, thank you.
Great. Welcome to all of our panelists. I think maybe I'll start down at this end with both Todd and Lynn to have you each talk a little bit about what's happening respectively in St. Peter and in Duluth. And then I'll work my way to the other end of the table and you guys can talk about challenges that may or may not be unique to urban areas. So Todd, why don't we start with you, and why don't you, if you could, think about the capacity crisis, the speed bumps, the hurdles, the difficulties that the child care field is facing as a business, and maybe talk about how you approach that in St. Peter, or what you're excited about in St. Peter as a city administrator.
So my hope is in St. Peter that we don't have a crisis any longer. I don't think we have it all figured out exactly, and we aren't perfect, but I think we've done some pretty clever things. Let me just mention a couple of them that might be some help to some of your communities, and maybe even talk about that data versus emotional kind of perspective and how to get cities and communities more involved. So one of the things that we were able to do is about 8 years ago or so, there's a community gathering about youth within our community. And so that was really a springboard for the city council and the school board and others to think about, to think more strategically about what needed to happen. A couple of different things that I'll mention related to that. The city council decided that the mayor would establish a task force on childcare. And sometimes those task forces are fantastic and everybody yells and cheers and it's wonderful and nothing really happens. One of the wonderful things though about being a mayor is that when you send out a letter and you invite people to attend a meeting for a specific purpose, lots of times they show up. They think that's pretty cool. Not when I send a letter, but when the mayor sends a letter. And so that's great. And so we had kind of the right mix of people to talk about this issue. And they really developed a strategy on how to think about the shortage of childcare slots within our community. And so let me mention that just for a few seconds. There's a short-term strategy and a long-term strategy to this. And in St. Peter, the short-term strategy was, frankly, it's hard to find a place to establish a daycare. If you want a center-based or institutional-based daycare, there just aren't a lot of facilities to do that. And so it was really evident very quickly that how can we help, how can we encourage small businesses, in-home daycare providers, to get into that business. And so one of the things that we did was establish this fantastic loan program to give them some money because maybe the inspector comes and says, well, your bathroom isn't quite right, or you need an additional swing set, or things like that. And oftentimes what we find in St. Peter is that based on the demographics of those folks that might have interest in starting that type of small business, they're already strapped like crazy. And so having a little bit of cash, a couple $1,000, $5,000 to make a couple of improvements is a significant impact. I gotta tell you, from a city administrator perspective, this is unbelievably genius kind of stuff, because frankly what happened with that mayor's task force is that we ended up being on the front page of the paper for like 4 or 5 weeks out of 7 weeks. And the community started to think, oh crap, this kind of is an issue, and we really should do something about this, and it makes a lot of sense, and here's a little bit of data that makes us feel good about that. And that's what kind of propelled some of those issues along. I talked about that little loan program that we did. We didn't have anyone have to take advantage of that because they just got into it on their own and figured out they could do it. So that promotion, that opportunity saying, woohoo, here's a business opportunity, and oh, by the way, it might fit with your life because now you're having your second child and you can't afford to have 2 kids in daycare, and so you gotta quit your job as a dental hygienist or whatever. You know, that's how you make these connections go forward. In the long term, we provided a larger loan program and actually loaned 2 of the daycares in town, one over $40,000 to help establish and buy all the carts and buy the cribs that were necessary and all those kind of things. And I think the city got into that knowing full well that we might not ever get all of our money back, and that might just be okay too. You know, you got to make this a community priority, what we do with young people. Let me mention one other one, or kind of 2 other ones. One other one that we saw in St. Peter is that in order to establish whether it was a center-based or a home daycare, you had to have the fire marshal come and do an inspection, which is really important and good stuff. And in our area, it takes 4 months for the guy to show. And because they're overworked and they're going through schools and all that kind of stuff, it's not their fault. Who can wait that long for anything today? And so what did we do? We spent a few $100s and sent our building official to school for a day and a half to be able to get the certification to do that. And I have 2 building officials. They can go out the next day and take a look. Let me mention one other one that was really important for us, especially for in-home daycare, a little tip, trick, hack, life hack. In our neck of the woods, to open an in-home daycare, you have to have an inspection by the county. And anybody county commissioners out here? Safe zone. Okay. So I mentioned this with Barb. We laughed about this at a mayor's meeting. So they charge $200 to come out and do that inspection. And that inspection just tells you whether you maybe can do this or not. And again, the demographics of the folks that might be interested in St. Peter and going into this small business to not only help their family, but just keep their boat afloat. They don't want to put out $200 on a maybe. And so my city council said, well, let's talk to the county commissioners and maybe we'll pay $100 and the county will pay $100. And of course the county said, no way, we're not paying $100. And so the city council said, well, we'll pony up the $200. Well, technically it was $195, but we'll pony up. And so it doesn't get too crazy, we'll cap our limit at $10,000, right? For a city budget of $7 million, $10,000, and how many people we're gonna have. And that little trick got 6 people into the home daycare business, or helped them decide whether they were gonna do that. And while that, for some communities, is big numbers, for us, even though they can be licensed up to 8 or 10 or whatever the number is, that created like 39 or 40 slots within our community. And that's a big deal for like on the cheap, right? And so there's a couple, well, anyway, I can keep going on some of those, but those are a couple of hacks or tricks that we use that really help us go. And continuing to have this be one of the vital issues of importance within our community. That child care and how we treat families and children is economic horsepower. And it's easy for me to talk about the emotions of that, but the numbers gotta make sense too, and businesses decide, and oftentimes city councils decide on the numbers. Keeping young families within our community really makes the school district unbelievably happy, and that brings lots of resources to our community too.
Thank you. So Lynn, tell us about what's happening in Duluth, if you're seeing similar capacity barriers and how you and your organization are addressing that, or maybe there's other barriers.
Sure. First of all, I'm going to say that I'm going to talk about all of our region because we serve the 7 counties. And Duluth is very different than our rural areas, of course. We do have childcare in Duluth, but it's still at a premium. And, but the rural areas are really suffering, and it really kind of came to a head in 2016 when we realized there was truly a crisis up on the Iron Range. A lot of the people who had had child cares were retiring when their husbands were retiring out of the mines, and suddenly it was really a big issue. So St. Louis County, Northland Foundation, the Minnesota Department of Iron Range Resource and Rehabilitation, along with the United Way of Northeast Minnesota, we created kind of a fund to help provide grants that would encourage people to start a child care or expand their child care. So that was kind of our first kind of moment really getting into finding solutions around the child care issue. But it wasn't very long before, I think it was the Center for Rural Policy and Development, they published their report, I believe it was in 2017, where it showed we had a shortage in our region of 4,500 slots. So this really brought to the forefront what we were facing. So in response, we partnered again with IRRR and Blandon Foundation, because we said, you know what, we need to really have the story. We need to be able to take something out to businesses, to the economic development community, and really share some hard and fast information that will help them realize that this is not just an issue here or there, it's a major crisis. So thanks to Wilder, we were able to have a report, and I have that with me, and I also have a summary sheet if you're interested. But I'm just going to give you a little bit of an example of how the shortage is affecting our region. If it's very costly, if 245 parents were not employed due to the lack of childcare, and they became employed, they could minimally increase the family income by $33,000. That's a minimal dollar amount. With combined earnings of these 245 people, that would total $8.1 million. And this would have a significant economic impact not only on the family, but also on communities and our region. The report showed that the impact on employers is a 13% loss in productivity, about $4,300 per employee who does not have childcare. We are losing $5.3 million in a lost tax revenue annually, and the potential for $13.3 million in lost lifetime earnings for children currently lacking childcare. The total impact of the shortage equals $30 million in direct impact and $18 million in indirect impact, a total impact of $48 million. This is huge. And although, you know, my background's early childhood, so I see how important childcare is, but when talking to the business community and the economic development community, we needed some hard and fast numbers in order for them to understand what kind of impact this is having on their communities, on their businesses, and on their families. We are seeing more and more economic development groups coming to the table, along with business people who never have seen this as their issue. And it was interesting the other day, our president, Tony Sertage, he was standing and talking about a meeting he was leaving for, and it's an economic development meeting, and he said, you know what? He said the first agenda item on the list is childcare. And so people are realizing more and more that it's going to take far more than just the usual people, the parents, the providers, to solve this issue. It really has to broaden, and we are seeing hospitals are coming forward, various different kinds of organizations are getting involved in this discussion. But the thing is now we really need to have them take action. Do you want me to go on and talk a little bit about what we have been doing? Do I have
Sure.
time?
Yeah,
Okay.
give us a couple specifics, things that have worked really well, please.
We've been very fortunate to receive 2 grants from from the Department of Employment and Economic Development, and one in 2017 and one in 2018, totaling $215,000. As a result of this, we've been able to create 300 childcare slots in our region. Yes, it is great. The trouble is, as quickly as those slots are being created, we are seeing slots that are going away. We did offer to all of these, though, consulting services of First Children's Finance, because it's really important to help people getting into childcare who may not have a business background, to make sure that they really have a strong business plan, and so that they can be successful and stay open. We also ask them to sign on to Parent Aware. I talk all the time, don't just say slots, say quality slots. We want to ensure that wherever children are in our region, they are in quality settings. The funding from BEAD has been very helpful, but it truly has been just the beginning. In the last, since June of 2018, we've had 40 child care providers contact us asking if we had available resources. We have been able, Northland Foundation, we've been giving $500 grants to family providers that have helped create about 140 more slots. We have 6 more that are in process right now, 6 more requests. But in partnerships with others, we've been trying to do some additional things, and even through our business finance program, we have been giving loans to child cares. We, earlier this year, were thrilled to receive money from the Department of Human Services. So right now, we are in the process of considering grant proposals, applications, and we will be able to give 5 more $10,000 grants for startup and or expansion of childcare. The sad part of the story is we have 14 applications sitting in our office right now. And so it's so necessary that an investment be made and really help to shore up the childcare, kind of that whole, I think the whole situation of childcare is so difficult because it isn't just the quality slots we need. We also need to pay people a living wage so that they can work in a childcare. And I'm hearing stories about people who have to choose between the pizza parlor that's paying more down the street or being paid in a childcare less. And their heart might be with the children, but the reality is they have to provide for their own families. So there is high demand, and we are hoping that we can continue down this road of the recognition that our state really needs to make the investment along with the businesses, economic development community, and the philanthropic community as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Can I maybe, Cesar, can I come to you at the end? Can I maybe have Stephanie talk? So thank you for giving us a little overview, an important overview of what's happening in outstate Minnesota. Stephanie, could you talk a little bit about what you see in the urban area here in Minneapolis? And is it different or is it alike? And what strategies are you finding that are working to increase slots and to address this capacity crisis?
Well, I think there's a lot of similarity in childcare no matter where you are around a need for high quality education for early education. And in the urban areas, what we're really seeing is a lack of professionals coming into and staying in the field. As Lynn said, we have people leaving the field in general for jobs that pay more, that are less stressful and less demanding. And so really attracting people and keeping people in the field is a huge need within the Minneapolis, Twin Cities, and suburban areas, and attracting new populations to the field. To be honest, I think there's tons of studies out there around the importance of diverse teachers, and we are not necessarily attracting people into early childhood. It doesn't pay well, it's stressful, it's a hard field to be in. And so we really need to come up with ways to attract people into the field. There are many childcare centers when we talk about capacity of spots, and slots for children that can't fully fill their center, not because they don't have the room, but because they can't find the staff to open those rooms. And I hear that in any meeting I go to. It's a consistent problem for individual centers, for large organizations. It's a continual issue. Along with that, I think when we look at what parents' needs are, is affordable childcare. In reality, because of that and some of the demands of what people are really trying to do to keep people in the field, the cost of childcare continues to go up, and it is hard for parents to afford high quality childcare. The CCAP rate doesn't pay the rate that most of us are charging. When you talk about $400 for an infant spot per week, most people are paying around $30,000 for 2 kids to be in childcare in the Twin Cities. And when you talk about that, there are not a lot of jobs that make it worth it to pay that and work. And so it's a struggle for a lot of families and a struggle for a lot of childcares to try and put together high quality centers and high quality childcare that is affordable. And so those are some of the things that I think are a little bit different. And then I think one of the things I hear everywhere I go to is that people in the childcare field have a real fear about what the minimum wage raising is going to do for the industry. And we have a couple years to figure that out, but in reality, when what you're going to be looking at paying an aide is more than what we're paying a teacher now, or very close to, there's this accordion effect that everyone is real fearful within the industry. And so I think all of us are looking at how to work with that. And so in order to combat a lot of those things, many centers are getting very creative around the benefits that they're offering staff. So if they can increase pay, they may be offering free childcare, they may be offering incentives that go along with that around the benefits to keep people in the field. And then there are programs out there to try and work with bringing people into childcare as an industry, as a provider. And so one of the programs that a lot of people are working with, and there's 2 or 3 different providers for that, but really getting people interested in early childhood and getting them a CDA so they can have entry-level step into early childhood into the field, and then develop that into a degree or further opportunity if they want to. And so that's been helpful, I think, to the industry. I'll talk later about one of the programs that I'm working with, but in the last year and a half, we've been able to graduate about 100 per people with a CDA, which is certainly an influx, but it has not solved the problem for the industry, and so there's a real need to attract people.
Great. So, Sisa, I'm going to let you talk a little bit about what Think Small is doing on many levels, legislative, which you are deep into, but programming and partnerships, and growing our own to address the capacity crisis shortage.
Sure. So I'll start with just to pick up, a lot of the things that you're hearing. One of the things I think Small is trying to bring to the conversation is trying to gather all the data and making sure that everything we're doing is based on data. For so long, we've been operating on anecdotes and stories, and so one of the things we're really trying to bring to this conversation is actual data on a regular basis. And so as we, Lynn mentioned the Center for Rural and Economic Policy. I'm close. That report that showed how many slots, we were short across the region. Think Small has also been working on trying to look at how many high-quality slots, right? What is the shortage of, or how many high-quality slots we have across the country, across the state. Another piece of data that we felt was really, really compelling as we were looking at this childcare crisis issue was Think Small did a closure survey about a couple of years ago, looking at providers who had actually closed their doors. It was one of the first provider surveys. There have been several since then, but one of the factors that was really interesting as we did a further analysis was that when we looked at parent-aware participation of those that had closed their doors, those that were not participating in parent-aware had a closure rate twice that of parent-aware participating providers. So there's obviously some sort of correlation to parent-aware participation. So as we talk about this childcare crisis and wanting to increase slots, we continue to hammer on that we need to increase not just slots, but high-quality slots. And so as we started to enter into this space, we really wanted to create a model, right? So what are the things, all the pieces that that we need to have in place for providers to be really successful, not only as entrepreneurs or professionals with living wages, but how are they supporting families and children and families in their community in a really meaningful way that is ultimately moving our needle. And for Think Small, that's really about reducing the achievement gap. So that's how we're looking at this entire kind of ecosystem. And so as we built our model out and as we're testing that model out, we are doing it based on data. And I'm going to pick up on what Peter talked about. One of the things that we want to be able to do is answer questions like, is there a barrier to the fire marshal? Like, how long does it actually take? This was something we hear all the time. The fire marshal is so long. It is such a barrier to getting licensure. And so we actually, our model, our system, we actually track everything. So from the time you put in your application, how long is it till the fire marshal comes out? How long is it till the licensor comes out? How long until you actually get your license? Like, what are all those touch points? Most recently, we've actually found a really interesting one in Hennepin County with the new background study requirements in which people need to get their fingerprint for their background study. We don't have enough vendors in Hennepin County. We've now increased 6 weeks. We have an increased 6-week wait time on licensure. So this is like real-time data in which we can say, hey, here's a barrier. We got to figure out how to fix this to be able to move things faster. So exactly what Peter and Lynn, you had a couple of ideas too. So as we created our model, we're also recognizing that this is an ecosystem. Not one entity can do this alone. There's just no way we can all do this alone. We have to have all the different pieces. And so as we look about trying to increase our slots, we see it kind of in 3 buckets. First is the technical assistance. Like, how do you figure out this licensure stuff? Has anybody ever opened up Rule 2 or Rule 3? It is not a fun book to read. Trying to figure out how many pieces of manips you need to have and where are the light sockets and where are the cords. Like, you literally need somebody to walk you through that. And you could be a master level, have a master's degree, you still need somebody to help you navigate that licensing system. And I love my licensing staff. I know we got some here. You've got a hard job, but it's a hard system to navigate. And so we really need that technical assistance, because what we find is that for many providers that get into the field, it's the licensing part that trips them up later down the road, right? They started doing things they didn't even realize they were doing inappropriately or wrong, and that causes all these issues that ultimately closes their program down. So if we get them started really well, we need to pair that with really solid business knowledge. Like, what does it mean to run a small business, right? These are all small businesses. Nobody gets into childcare because they had a business degree. They get into it because they love children and they love families. And so we got to make sure they have those really solid business skills, confidence, and competence at the same time. And then they need to have the parent-aware piece of it, right? And they need to have that quality. Why is quality so important, not only to you as a professional, but your families, your children, and your community? And it's an ecosystem. You're in and out of those 3 parts of it constantly, right? You start off with a little bit of business knowledge, you get some technical assistance, you go into parent aware, oh, now I want to expand, need some more business knowledge, licensing change their things, right? Like, it's this continuous kind of thing in which we need to be supporting the entire ecosystem. And so through the generous support of Blue Cross Blue Shield, Think Small has been working since last summer, really trying to implement this model through a continuous improvement lens. We're actually trying to build off of what we know or what we've learned through the parent-aware model, right? Like, we've got great research on how to change adult behavior, how to support providers. And so we're trying to take some of those similar learnings and apply it to the business side of this effort. And so we have been operating, like I say, since June with Blue Cross Blue Shield. We have 1 person in this Hennepin and Ramsey County doing this amazing work. Since June, we have actually created over 300, almost 400 slots with 19 brand new providers that have opened their doors, 18 of which are in the parent-aware pathway. So we're really excited about that. More importantly, we have over 100 that are in the pipeline, and probably that much that are on the wait list. We've actually had to, about 3 or 4 months ago, implement a prioritization system. There's only 1 person, that's all we have. And so we really are struggling with the need, and you guys talked about this. There are lots of people that want to do this and figure this out. We just don't have enough support, the ability to support them as much as we would like to. So I'll stop there for now.
Okay. Wow, that's a lot. So I want to piggyback off what Cisa said, and I'm going to open a question up so any of you can answer this, or all of you. So Cece, you talk about childcare as an ecosystem, right? There are business elements to it. There is an education element to it. There is a community building piece of it. There is providing the economic opportunity for parents to go to work and school. There's health benefits, all of these things. My question is, who in each of your communities, who are the partners that you've really relied on? That's the first part of it. And my second part is, who in the community are the voices that are starting to come forward to really speak up within this ecosystem to say, hey, this benefits us in this way, this benefits us in this way, this benefits all of us in this way. So who are some of the partners you've really relied on, new partners maybe, or existing partners? And who are the voices that you're really hearing in your community that are helping this momentum, this conversation, this ecosystem expand and improve?
Let me be one of the first ones to jump in, obviously. So within St. Peter is a unique community in that the largest employers within our community include Gustavus Adolphus College, include the state hospital. Some of you are familiar, St. Peter's the home to the St. Peter Regional Treatment Center, which houses mentally ill and dangerous and sexual predators. And so because of that, we have a lot of folks that seem to understand systems and can work within systems very well. And so we really see the parents that work within those communities step up and express interest. Our largest centers are actually operated by two parent groups. Both are not-for-profits. They operate in the city-owned community center. And so we have provided space for them, frankly not free, but at a really good rate with great facilities, and the library's right next door, and there's a gymnasium and all of those kind of things that help make that go. And so those are folks that have been champions. I don't want to let go of the Initiative Foundation, helped us on this kind of quest, helped us get some of the juice to make that go. And the school district has been very important for us. One of the things that we found related to having quality, frankly, was that early childhood education opportunity. And so in St. Peter, we're fortunate enough to have a transit system. And so one of the things that we heard was, oh man, it's great, my child can go to daycare, but I'd really like them to get to early childhood education, and I can't drive back from Mankato to get them there and then wait around for a couple of hours or 3 hours and then take them back to daycare or home and then go back to work. That just isn't gonna work for me. And so one of the things we were able to do was provide a transit system to support that. So I think it's like $1.25 a day. Mr. Cliff and Mr. Cliff's bus, the preschool express we call it, comes to pick up your child at daycare, takes them to ECFE, takes them back to takes them back to the daycare after early childhood is completed. And so those are some simple things. Certainly we have evening events and other activities, but that's really where we see the leadership coming from. We don't see a lot of leadership, frankly, within the business community. But again, our employee base is dominated by college, state employees, and others. So we're maybe a little bit different than many other communities.
Okay, thank you.
Our best partner throughout our kind of journey learning about childcare has been Childcare Aware. We have an incredible partnership with them, and that has really helped us to stay focused on what we can really do to help providers, especially get on board with the quality improvement rating system, Parent Aware. But as we've been in this conversation around developing more opportunities for childcare, I was just thinking about Duluth. We have a kind of a task force committee. We have the city represented, we have what's called Fuse Duluth, we have a deed representative sitting there, we have a college representative, we have Eric Forsman, who is a city councilor but also works for Minnesota Power. And so people that, I would say this is an unusual group to get together. Oh, also the county, the licensors are actually sitting at the table as well, because people admit, they say that I don't really know a whole lot about this world. You know, they want to learn more in order to figure out what is the action. The city is considering possibly getting a little bit more into this arena. I don't think I can talk about it, but that they may be at least considering making some funding available. But what's happened is we've made the world a little smaller as far as I usually am not that involved with business people, but through this task force, we are helping to connect people, and that's really key. There's a man who bought one of the closed elementary schools, perfect space for childcare in one part of the building, and it was the Head Start space years ago. And it does need a little renovation, but he is dedicated. He said, I want a childcare in here. So we've been able to connect him with people who can help him with that. I went and toured the space, brought someone from UMD with me, brought a former childcare director with me. We took a look at the space, and then connecting him to potential, interested parties. And I haven't heard who yet is moving in, but he has about 4 different people, and he really didn't know where to begin. And he doesn't have time to do that. He's building a 60-unit apartment complex with 40 more planned for next door and 40 above. And so this is where I think it's a role we've been able to play, because we know just enough, and we know the people who know even more. And so I think that that's an important part of this effort, is getting the different people in the room to really solve the issue. And these things are happening up on the range as well, even in International Falls, the cities at the table, the economic development people, and childcare providers.
Yes. I'm wondering, why don't we stop here for just a minute and open it up for some questions? Is there any burning question in the audience right now from something that you've heard, given the time, because it's 8:45? Anything? All right, well, I tell you what, we'll just keep going down the line then. And if a burning question comes to you, raise your hand, because I know we've got some momentum going with our panelists, but I wanted to give you a chance. Okay, raise your hand if you think of something. Go ahead, keep going.
All right, great. So in the metro area, we have a lot of great partners doing all the different work, and so we solidly have always partnered with Generation Next, the Northside Achievement Zone, St. Paul Promise Neighborhood, St. Paul Schools District, Minneapolis School District. Those are all really amazing partners. Again, as we think about this ecosystem, not just the business, the very specific technical assistant, but this ecosystem. But as we get into that business side of things, we really are doing a lot of work specifically with our licensors, the Hennepin and Ramsey County licensors. They've actually become, I think they may have Trinette on speed dial, and I'm pretty sure they call her, all the time, or like, we've got another provider, which is really exciting to have that level of partnership with licensing. We're starting to get into some conversations with economic development folks, more at the state level though, than like specifically in the Twin Cities. I didn't get into this, but a lot of the work that Think Small is doing is actually pushing this conversation at the state capitol, right? So what do we need to be doing as a state around this? And so the business community and the economic development community is really stepping up at the Capitol, and I have to give a huge nod to them. We've got folks that have never talked about childcare ever at the Capitol, really lobbying hard for increased supports around supporting the early childhood ecosystem, and so that has been really a lovely surprise and just building our group of advocates at the Capitol. And so, I think it's just lots of folks are starting to get into this. And one thing I didn't mention earlier, though, is one of the things that is unique between the metro and the rural. We hear a lot of times that the childcare crisis is really only a rural issue, but it is really a metro issue for slightly different reasons. One, Stephanie actually touched on it, is there's the cost element. Because we are primarily center-based, the cost to affordable high-quality slots is really an issue here in the Twin Cities metro. But we also don't have enough culturally and linguistically diverse providers to meet families' needs. And so that's really an area Think Small is focusing on, is trying to make sure that we have, we're supporting those communities. And so those communities are starting to really step forward and looking to support their own community, and how can we do that? So that is really an exciting partnership as well. And then I'll pause there and go to Stephanie.
I think CISA spoke well to what's really going on here in the metro areas. The only thing I would add to that is I do think that there's a lot of different collaboratives that people are joining, directors collaboratives, pieces where they're actually sharing resources, sharing trainings, being able to support each other, not necessarily through an organization, but within individual providers, and being able to gain support that way.
Yeah. Two others I just wanted to mention. None of us mentioned it. I'm surprised from our partnership. So First Children's Finance is an essential partnership, I think, for all of us, and really, and they are great partners. Lynn mentioned also the Child Care Aware System. Think Small is part of the Child Care Aware System. We actually are the Child Care Aware Office, and that system, we partner quite well, and I just want to give a call out to Families First down south. As we're developing our model, they have some private funding, are doing the work, and so we're kind of sharing our learnings back and forth. What's working for you in your model, what's working for us. Again, trying to think about this more systematically. So just wanted to call out that.
I'll add one more thing too. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Minnesota Foundation, the Sheltering Arms Foundation, the Mardag Foundation, they're the ones that have really helped the Northland Foundation be able to support the child care providers in our region. And I will tell you that we have providers who've been in business, since yesterday, but primarily the 20-year to 40-year providers who have said to me, the best thing that ever happened to them was Parent Aware. They said, I am now recognized as a professional. And in fact, there is a woman up in Chisholm who was going out of business. She said, I was done. And she said, when Parent Aware came along, I finally feel like now somebody is recognizing me and the role that I play in the lives of children, and providing me additional tools and strategies so I can keep my business fresh and engaging and really focused on high quality. So thank you to those foundations.
So the ecosystem is expansive, it's deep, it's broad, and basically what I'm hearing is we need everybody within the community. When I think about our littlest learners in Minnesota, I think not only about the great experiences they're having today, but I do think about the future. I'm a parent, and I'm a planner too. I'm constantly thinking ahead. And when I started my remarks at the beginning, I talked about how this would be an opportunity to celebrate together and to think about really what is working. So what I wanted to do is I wanted each of our panelists to just think for a second about the future, and about one thing that you're working on right now, or you're about to begin working on, that gives you great hope for your community and the littlest learners in your community and the business of childcare. So if you could give us one thing that you're very excited about to leave us with a very positive note.
This is maybe more specific to St. Peter, but during the summer months, when what we see is childcare for those first, second, third, fourth graders, where there's a big demand for that, where there's not slots developed, we now have an A and B system. And so we work with the child care providers, the not-for-profits that work within our community center. And so we have groups of A children and B children. And so the A's might be in daycare during the morning hours, and the B's are doing recreational programming with the city. And then in the afternoon, we flip. And that essentially doubles some of our capacity. And it's really easy stuff to do, and we can make it happen. And parents eat this stuff up. And that's one of the sales pitches for keeping young families within communities like St. Peter, which is really, I'd love to say that we're altruistic like you guys are, and child care is so important for us. And not that it's not, but the reality is this is sustainability within our community. This is about economic development. That's what it's about. This is a method and means to make some of that happen. And not that it's not important, but that is really what some of the driver is for us.
I would say that the idea that we do have some additional funding right now, so we can offer again to people who want to start a childcare and or expand their childcare. And there is twofold reason for that. Definitely we need more quality childcare in our region. But as the early learning area administrators, or the scholarship administrators, we need places for these children and families to find care. And that is so important. So, and again, we're saying to them, sign on to Parent Aware as part of this part of the deal, and so that we're hoping that there will be more places for children who have those scholarships to have access to quality slots. And also the other thing is we're prioritizing infant toddler slots with this money because they're just about non-existent, especially for infants in our area. So that's the priority in this grant round.
So I think you've heard from all of us, you know, while we need more models and things like that, what we really need is more money. We need more money in this space, right? And so, I'm just gonna call it out, right? We need more money invested in this part of the ecosystem. We've done amazing jobs and really putting a lot of money in the quality part of it, but now we need more money on this technical assistance side. And so what I'm most excited about for Think Small is that we are really trying to build what we're doing to be able to tell our story better, right? Why we need to invest our money in certain places and at certain times. What we need to invest in 5 years ago and what we need to invest in 5 years are probably very different things, and we need to be basing those decisions based on data. Not stories, not anecdotes, but actual data. And so I'm really excited about, especially with our new strategic plan, our results-based accountability, everything we're doing is through that lens of data. How are we being accountable to our children, our families, our communities? And that's how we're driving the work that we do. So that's what I'm most excited about.
I think I have a few things, but one, I think I'm excited that there's a lot more talk around early childhood, the importance of it, and the fact that it needs funded through government support in order to be successful in the state of Minnesota. And two, specifically at our program, the Workforce Development Program, I am afraid of what happens to childcare in the metro if we don't attract new people to the field. And the program that we're working with is free. It has 80% of the people in the program diverse, many of them English language second learners. And so they need more support to be able to pass that electronic test that we have out there in only English, right? So we need people to be attracted to the field. People have passion, they don't have an entryway, and so we need to be able to support that passion into the field to be able to maintain the field. So that's what I'm excited about.
All right.
Thank you. Tracy, thank you for moderating this conversation. Thank you to the panel. We really appreciate it. Let's give them all a round of applause. A couple of things I wanted to add. I think he slipped out, but I did want to acknowledge Representative Dave Baker, who was here this morning. I was hoping to be able to do that before he slipped out, but his leadership, if you see him and talk to him, please acknowledge that we appreciate his leadership. I also wanted to add for us a couple of other foundations that have been really crucial to the kinds of work that CSAID has been describing this morning, and that's the Richard Schultz Foundation, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and then Sheltering Arms, like was mentioned as well. And I believe we have some folks here from those foundations. It is critical to this work that we're doing, so thank you so much for that. I also want to do a special thanks to our event sponsors, Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development, Egan Company, and Ywca for underwriting this event. Thank you so much. You'll be hearing from us this summer about our next season of Think Small, Small Talks. We'll let you know at sometime midsummer what our series is going to be about and the schedule for that. So we hope you will keep joining us and get that on your calendars. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day today.